And one night I was at dinner in college, beautiful dinner, like Nebuchadnezzar's banquet. And I found myself next to a Nobel Prize winner. Never met one before. Gosh, this is going to be interesting. I want to ask him lots of questions.
Welcome aboard. In this video, John Lennox recounts the story of Daniel and beautifully unpacks its powerful relevance for our world today. He draws striking parallels between Daniel's life and the challenges of our own age, while also sharing a vivid personal story of meeting a renowned Nobel Prize winner as a young teenager. Grab a seat as we listen to this thought-provoking talk.
It says here, Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food, but just stop. He wouldn't defile himself. Whatever eating this food meant, Daniel regarded it as defiling him in his context. I don't need to tell you what defiles you. You know exactly what defiles you. We only need a few seconds of the internet before we have that sense of conscience that we're defiling ourselves. You have got to answer it for yourself. It has to do with his moral attitude. He wasn't going to defile himself. Now, what did the defilement involve? There are various reasons, and the scholars discuss them. And I read their wisdom, and I'm impressed with some of it, but not with all of it. And there are various possibilities why this food might have defiled him. The Israelites' food laws, the prohibition of eating blood, and the prohibition of eating food sacrificed to idols. My own suspicion is this. Please notice he reacted against the food and the wine. That's because he was teetotal. It is not. Daniel talks about drinking wine in the rest of the book, just to make it clear. He wasn't against drinking wine, in moderation, of course. But why refuse it, I wonder? This is King's College Babylon. Perhaps it was like King's College Cambridge, where at dinner at night, as in my college at Cambridge, a scholar would stand up and read a Latin prayer and acknowledge God. But this is Babylon. It's very difficult to imagine that an evening meal in this circumstance would not begin with a libation to the gods. I don't know, but I can tell you something. Daniel lived to see the king's banquet, Belshazzar's feast. And in chapter 1 of Daniel, you have two big issues. You first, the vessels taken from the temple at Jerusalem and put in the museum in Babylon. Secondly, you have this protest in the university dining hall. In chapter 5 of Daniel, those two ideas come together. Because Belshazzar gets the vessels out of the temple, fills them with wine, and forces his top brass, his politicians, judges, and everybody else to drink and praise the gods of wood, silver, and stone. And the result of that was he lost his entire empire, because God wrote on the wall, "You are weighed in the balances and found wanting." I wonder, did Daniel have the sense as a teenager to see that if he compromised by offering the libation among the students, that it would end up at Belshazzar's feast? I don't know, but it did end up at Belshazzar's feast. And what was that all about? That was about how the Babylonians interpreted the universe. They were thoroughly idolatrous, the most idolatrous nation in the world. That is, they deified the fundamental forces of nature, which many scientists do today. In effect, they don't call them gods. Now here's the situation, and it's very important to me, because I'm in a university where the basic ideology, worldview, is naturalism. I don't believe in naturalism, but I'm prepared to teach in the university and accept its education, as are many of you at the universities in your country. How do you work that out? It's not easy. I want to protest against the uniform assumption of an essentially pagan philosophy in the academy in the West today. What do? Stop eating? No. Now let's get this straight, folks. This book of Scripture tells us what Daniel did then in his circumstances. It doesn't tell us what to do today in our circumstances. We have to grow up and work these things out. And they're not easy to work out. How do I protest against the intellectual food that's being served up? And you know some of the ways that I have protested. But I started protesting a long time ago. in little ways, talking to other students, sharing with them my worldview. And that is why it's so important that here in Norway, you've got an institution like Gimle Collin teaching worldview thinking. It's utterly crucial for us to inject into the secular world. And this is what Daniel was doing effectively. How do you protest? Now you notice Daniel didn't start a revolution, and neither did Paul. Paul was a Roman citizen, a Jew, perfectly positioned to get involved in stirring up violence, but he didn't. We got to do it in a Christian way. That's not easy. In other words, the question is, how do I witness in my university dining hall? Well, first of all, by talking to other people clearly, as no doubt Daniel did. Now, the philosophy of these people was like it is today. They reduced everything to fundamental primeval soup of nature. The gods, as I said last night, even appeared from nature. Daniel's worldview was that of Genesis. There is a creator. And above all, he wanted to stand up for the idea that the most sensible explanation of this world was that there's a creative mind behind it. Are you standing up for that? Or do you think it's not important? The doctrine of creation was never more important than today. We need to inject it into our society because it makes sense of everything. This is a word-based universe. Daniel said, I don't want this food. And he spoke to the dean of students and he said, would you mind taking it away? And the man said, oh goodness me. He liked Daniel, obviously. Daniel had made friends. Just watch how Daniel behaves. He's the believer. The dean is an unbeliever. And he says to them, look, Daniel, it's more than my life's worth, because if the king sees you looking worse than everybody else, he'll take my head off. That was that. And Daniel understood. Instead of putting pressure on the man, he said, look, let's do an experiment. Do it quietly for 10 days, and then you judge. It's the first controlled trial in history, by the way, you who are interested in science. But what's this about, folks? And you'll forgive a personal story, but you'll see its relevance, because one, it's quick, and two, you'll get its point. This brings me back to when I was 19. And one night I was at dinner in college, beautiful dinner, like Nebuchadnezzar's banquet. And I found myself next to a Nobel Prize winner. Never met one before. Gosh, this is going to be interesting. I want to ask him lots of questions. I've always asked people lots of questions. So I tried, and in my perhaps cheeky way, I began to ask him about God, and he didn't like it. So being a kind young Irishman, I changed the topic. And I thought that was the finish of it. After the dinner, he said, Lennox, come to my room. Didn't sound good. And I saw him inviting one or two other professors to his room. So we went to the room, sit down. They didn't sit down. Now he said, Lennox, do you want to make a career in science? Yes, sir. Well, in front of witnesses right now, give up this childish belief in God. It will cripple you intellectually. You'll never make it. You look worse than everybody else. And if you want to look as good as everybody else, you'll give it up right now. Well, I was terrified. I'd never known pressure like that. And I couldn't help thinking that if he'd been a Christian and I'd been an atheist, he would have lost his job the next day. But it was okay. So in the end, having prayed a rapid prayer to the Lord, get me out of this, what do I do here? I said to him, looking straight in the eye, I said, what have you got to offer me that's better than what I've already got? And he said, the evolutionary philosophy of Émile Bergson. I said, what? You see, I knew about that because I'd read C.S. Lewis. So I said, sir, with respect, if that's all you've got, I'll take the risk and stick with what I've got. And I got up and walked out. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why I'm sitting here. That event in my life changed my life completely. It put steel into my heart. And I resolved that if ever, I never dreamed I would, but if ever I got a senior academic position, I would never abuse it like that. I would try and offer people evidence, as I have in Oslo and in the university here and all around the world, and encourage people to make up their own minds. But you see, that's it. Why should you look worse? And I know many of you have had this pressure. Just keep quiet about your Christianity. You'll be marked down. And I was talking to some brilliant students recently in another part of the world, senior people doing advanced research. And one of them said to me, look, we hear you're a Christian and you stand up in public. Listen, if we even mentioned, and they weren't Christians, if we even mentioned we occasionally went to church to find out what goes on there, we'd be marked down. So I sympathize with you folks enormously. But whatever you do, you've got to find ways of going against the flow here. You've got to be sensitive. There's no point in sending verses on the internet to your professor every morning at 6 o'clock. You've got to work at it, and you work with those younger than you, first of all, and your peers, before you attempt those above you. We've got to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But I tell you something, if you make up your mind this weekend that you're going to stand for God and society, the Lord himself will give you the opportunities.
The story of Daniel is as relevant today as it was in the ancient world. Living in exile within a powerful pagan empire, Daniel chose to resist the prevailing culture and its practice of worshiping gods made of wood and stone. Though surrounded by pressure to conform, he remained steadfast in his allegiance to the one true and living God. The biblical vision affirms that God is the source and sustainer of all creation. The universe is not self-originating, nor is it the product of blind chance, but the work of divine intelligence and purpose. This conviction stands in direct opposition to cultural and academic narratives that seek to explain origins without reference to God. Like Daniel, believers today are called to live faithfully and thoughtfully within a culture that often excludes the Creator from its understanding of reality, standing firm in the conviction that behind the universe is not mere matter, but a personal and sovereign God. Thanks for watching. God bless you.